Jason, today we're talking about the fact that God is interested in the whole person. He's not just interested in sort of the spiritual side of our lives. I think for every human being, it's easy to sort of compartmentalize your life. And I think Mormons are no different. Maybe even in some cases in the Mormon community, it's really like it's all about like trying to be perfect and trying, on a Sunday morning, you're one person and the rest of the week you sort of let your hair down and you're somebody else. And what we're trying to do in this lesson is help people to have a right picture of who God is, that God cares about all of you. He doesn't just care about sort of the churchy side of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so that I experienced that growing up in the LDS churches. My friends and I were always part of what was going on Sunday morning in the church, and throughout the week we were, maybe somebody a little bit different than who you would see at church on Sunday. And I think it's such a big deal to realize that God cares about everything, your whole life. It's not just that spiritual side of you. It's not just your good works, right? And in fact, the Bible says that all of our good works are filthy deeds in the sight of God. And so it's not just about your spiritual life, the Sunday morning thing, and maybe your young men's, young women's activities. It's not just those things that God cares about. It's your entire being. It's everything about your life, even the small things.
Yeah, and this concept comes all over the place in the Bible, but in particular in Matthew 22, Jesus is asked by some religious leaders, hey, what's the most important law in all the laws? And his response was really interesting because he said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind. And he said, the second is like it, you must love your neighbor as yourself. Now, what I see in that passage is at least three things, probably more than that, but for the sake of this video, just at least three things. We see that he's talking about your emotional side because he says you should love yourself. I think a lot of Mormons struggle, well, a lot of Americans struggle to love themselves. So he cares about that, your emotional side. He cares about your relational side. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. So he wants you to love your neighbor. So he does care about our relationships. That matters to him. And then, of course, he says, love the Lord your God. So that's your spiritual side. So I see spiritual, relational, emotional in Matthew 22. So let's break those down. Let's go in reverse order, and let's start with the emotional side. So emotional health, we think, is seeing ourselves like God sees us, no more and no less. It's having the courage to become self-aware and to lean into our fears and insecurities.
In the LDS church, you literally have a checklist of what you can do to make sure you're right with God, and you're constantly gauging your own acceptance off of that. Is God happy with what I'm doing? Am I being punished for the things I've done wrong? Where have I fallen short? Where have I let God down? And so being able to see yourself the way God sees you, that's huge and is going to be very difficult for a lot of people.
Now, the second thing is relational health, and that is when you can truly love the people around you and want the best for their lives. Relational health means you're willing to speak the truth in love, even when it's uncomfortable. Now, Jason, I think when I think about relational health, I think about not being fake with people around you. And I'm not trying to point fingers at my Mormon friends, but I know that a lot of them have said it is like a culture where it's all about the facade. It's all about, you say what, the kids say what they think their parents want to hear. You say what you think your bishop wants to hear. So there's a lot of sort of false pretense, not just in Mormonism, but I think in a lot of churches there can be a lot of false pretense because you're trying to be someone that you're not. You're trying to fool someone into thinking that you're someone that you're not. But relational health goes so much further than that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because a lot of the culture in the LDS culture, there's somebody else along on the ride with you, telling you whether or not you're worthy of certain things, and so you have interviews with your bishop or with a state councilman or somewhere along those lines, and maybe you're confessing sins to them or sharing experiences that you've had. and they get to kind of ride along with you on this journey of whether or not you're accepted, whether or not you're worthy, and so that makes it very difficult for somebody to really have a relationship with Jesus and be able to see themselves the way that God sees them.
Now, the last component then is what we call spiritual health. And here's how we define it. Spiritual health is letting Jesus fix the brokenness at the core of our being. It's submitting our attitudes and actions to God so that we can start living from the inside out. And maybe some of you watching this video have never heard of this phrase before, this term before, living from the inside out. And we're going to be talking, Jason, more about this in topics 4, 5, 6, really the rest of this series. But the point here, just if we can introduce spiritual health, is God is interested in fixing us on the inside first, and then eventually that works its way out, right, Jason? That's different than most religions. Most religions are about trying to fix yourself on the outside, like you're trying to do the things that make you worthy, that make you righteous. And it's frustrating, isn't it? Maybe, Jason, you can, as we close this topic down, you can speak to that in your own life, trying to be perfect on the outside. And then when you became a Christian, you realized Jesus changed you from the inside, and that worked its way out.
Yeah, and that change was drastic too, because I still have friends who are on the outside. They look like they're doing everything right, and maybe they have some great things in their life. They have a great job, they have a great family, a happy marriage, things like that. But on the inside, they are so broken. They're struggling, and they have questions, and there's anxiety and stress, and nobody knows about these things because on the outside, they're making this this facade, this false appearance that looks like everything is okay. And that's a huge thing in the LDS culture. And I know, it's not everybody, of course. And I want to say, man, there are some amazing people in the LDS church, man. It's people with some huge hearts and really love each other and really are living these commandments. They love their God. And they love people. And so this isn't about, saying that everybody in the LDS church is fake or anything like that. But what I know from my own life growing up, from family, from friends, is that people are really broken on the inside, even though the outside looks okay. And so Jesus comes along and he changes us. He tells us that he takes out our stony heart and gives us a new heart of flesh, and we start to change the way we behave, the way we treat people, the way we interact with people changes because of what Jesus did for us, instead of us trying to make a good impression, or instead of us trying to earn our love from God.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that as we go through this series. So if you're watching this and you're saying, man, this is all so new to me, maybe you've never thought about it like this, that's great. I mean, the point here is to help you to understand that God cares about the whole person. And so if we're going to help you pursue God, we want to make sure you know the heart of God. We want to make sure you know the character of God, the nature of God. He's not just interested in your checkbook. He's not just interested in your Sunday mornings. He's not just interested in your spiritual side, whatever that means to you. He's interested in your whole person, all of you. That's the God of the Bible.